Freedom doesn't disappear overnight. It is dismantled, piece by piece, in the court system, in policy, and in public opinion, until what is left looks like justice to those who were cheering on the dismantling. And that's where we are right now. Americans are cheering on the state as they disappear migrants, as they strip civil liberties from all Americans, and as they crush dissent. They're cheering this on, not because they are afraid, not because they're evil, but because they have been taught to see fascism as safety and their silence as strength. But by the time they have realized what they've endorsed, the doors will already be locked behind them. Fascism is not a slippery slope. It is a staircase. There are steps that need to be taken to get to that point. But America is already halfway down that staircase. There is something so uniquely horrifying about a population, a country like the United States of America, cheering on its own collapse. They aren't cheering out of desperation. They're not cheering out of fear, but they're cheering out of complete manufactured stupidity and selfishness. Americans believe that because it starts with migrants, that it will stop there. Americans believe that because the violence of the state starts in border towns and sanctuary cities, that it somehow will not make its way to their neighborhoods and their families and then to them. They think that their passports, their status, and their whiteness will protect them from the violence of the state, but it won't. By the time that they've realized what they've endorsed, what they've cheered on, the people will already be gone. The systems and the structures will have already been built, and the laws to continue to carry out this violence will have already been passed. Let's be very clear about what is happening right now. In the United States of America, people are being detained without trial. They are being held in for-profit prisons, denied access to legal counsel, denied contact with their families, denied basic needs like food and medical attention. They are being targeted based on appearance, social media activity, and vague associations, and really nothing else. The state is disappearing people off the streets. This is not hyperbole. This is policy. This is the Trump administration's policy. ICE agents are now regularly detaining people based on things like a tattoo that might be gang-related, or wearing clothing that could be interpreted as gang colors or symbols. Something as simple as a Chicago Bulls hat may land you into CCOT. Deleting pictures before you travel may land you in a detention center. Attending a pro-Palestine protest, or having relatives or acquaintances who did any of the things I just mentioned. These are not crimes. They're aesthetic choices, they're political opinions, they are vague associations. They're being used to justify indefinite detention. And the American public is not outraged. They're not mobilizing, they're not resisting. In fact, a lot of them are cheering this on. They're saying, this is what I voted for. Because they believe that this only applies to illegals. That they believe that this is how you make a country safe. They think that this is about getting some form of justice on the people who stole their jobs or brought in crime. The law does not stop at the border. Once you allow the state to disappear one group of people, the precedent has been set. The precedent then metastasizes, and there's nothing stopping it from disappearing you. Do you think that your ID is enough to prove that you are a U.S. citizen? You think your citizenship card, your passport, will save you from someone with a badge who says they don't believe you? Let one ICE agent claim that your documents look fake. Let them decide that you are being uncooperative. Let them mark you down as a risk. If there is no process to prove who you are, you will disappear just like everybody else. The main issue here is that people are being deprived of their right to due process. So what is due process? The 5th and 14th Amendment guarantees that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. That applies to non-citizens. And yet ICE routinely violates this, holding people without charge for weeks or months, especially in private-run, for-profit facilities where transparency is virtually non-existent. In theory, due process protects all of us. It is the right to know the charges against you. It is the right to defend yourself. It is the right to a fair trial of your peers. But if that right becomes conditional, based on citizenship, on visa status, or political views, then it's no longer a right. It is a privilege, one that the state can take away at will. And they are. They're stripping people of their due process. Let's talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is a Venezuelan asylum seeker who was illegally deported by ICE just a few weeks ago. This deportation was in direct defiance of a court order that he had been granted, a withholding of removal, a legal protection meant to prevent the deportation of people who could potentially face persecution or torture back in their home country. ICE deported him anyways. They referred to it as an administrative error. But let's be honest, this was not some sort of glitch. It was a test, a power flex, a deliberate override of the judicial authority to see if someone would stop them. The Supreme Court later ruled that his deportation violated federal law as he had not faced due process, and the US government had not proven their claim that he was affiliated with any gangs or he had any sort of criminal record. Previous immigration hearings confirmed that Garcia had no criminal record or no gang affiliation. But I want to make something very clear. Even if Kilmar Abrego Garcia was a member of a US-grown prison gang, MS-13, he still deserves due process. He still deserves his day in court. The presumption of innocence, the idea that you are innocent until proven guilty, applies to all of us, or it applies to none of us. Garcia is now being held in El Salvador's Secot mega prison, described by Human Rights Watch as an authoritarian black box. It is known for its use of forced prison labor, and it is the very kind of facility, the same violent facility, that the US claims to oppose in other countries abroad, but is building the same systems and structures that are required to perpetuate this type of violence. His case is not an outlier. It is the blueprint. Kilmar's case is part of a pattern. Over 600 international students, mostly from Palestine or Muslim-majority countries, have had their visas revoked since the start of 2024. In many cases, their only offense was attending or organizing a pro-Palestinian rally or protest. Mohsen Madawi, a longtime US resident and graduate of Columbia University, was lured into a fake citizenship interview, detained by ICE, and then held for weeks without charges. Mahmoud Khalil, also from Colombia, was abducted from his home under the Alien Enemies Act, a law first written in 1798, and was mostly used to imprison Japanese Americans during World War II. These are not isolated incidents, though. They are systematic. The Department of Homeland Security has already partnered with data brokers and social media monitoring firms to pick up on anti-Israel sentiment as a proxy for extremism, as a proxy for terrorism. Students like Rameza Ozturk, who was kidnapped off the streets by ICE, was taken into custody without charges based on anonymous tips, campus surveillance, or content scrapped from her social media. In Rameza's particular case, she was taken into custody and detained by ICE for writing a vaguely anti-Israel op-ed in her school newspaper. What we are witnessing is not just the rise of a police state. It is the fascist transformation of American society, and it is following the same patterns that we have seen before, specifically the ones that unfolded in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Before the camps, before the death squads, before the industrialized genocide, there were laws, there were administrative processes, there were categories created that quietly marked certain people for exclusion, for detention, for surveillance. People think that Nazi Germany started with the gas chambers, but it didn't. It started with detention lists. It started with emergency decrees. It began with language that framed outsiders as threats, language that painted dissent as danger, language that made it feel normal to hand over your neighbors to the authorities. The Nazis passed laws that superseded civil liberties. in times of national threat. They created secret police agencies that operated outside of normal courts. They detained people without trial. They targeted communists and union organizers and Jews and immigrants and the disabled and the LGBTQ people. They used vague charges like security threat or moral corruption to justify the indefinite imprisonment of these people. Does any of that sound familiar to you? Right now in the United States of America, ICE operates outside of the bounds of normal legal structures. Its agents are not held to the same standards as police, its detention facilities are not subject to public oversight, and it does not need probable cause to detain. It does not need a judge to convict. It is already using this power not only against undocumented people, but on legal residents, visa holders, students, and yes, even US citizens. In Germany, the camp started small. People called them protective custody. They were supposed to be temporary. They were for the worst elements, the communists, the traitors, the people who didn't belong. The public accepted this. They even supported it because they believed that it would never apply to them. But by the time it did, it was too late. What makes all of this worse, what makes it truly unbearable, is that so many Americans are proud of it. They are proud of their ignorance. They wear it like armor. They don't know that being in the United States without proper documentation is a civil offense, not a criminal one. They do not know what due process actually means. They do not understand that the Constitution is applied to everyone within the borders of the United States, not just the people that they like. But they don't care about these things because they have been taught that migrants are the reason that they can't afford rent, that immigrants are the reasons why their bosses treat them like shit, that refugees are the reason that they don't have health care. But that is a lie. It is a poisonous but very deliberate lie. It was not migrants who stole your pensions, it was corporations. It was the same people who fund politicians, who influence how laws are written, who outsource your jobs, who raise your rent and bankrupt your hospitals. Undocumented migrants paid over $22.5 billion into the Social Security system in 2022 alone. Money that they will likely never see. That is stolen labor that is keeping the barely existing system afloat. Immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than native-born citizens. The crime wave narrative is a myth sold to you by media outlets that rely on your fear for clicks and compliance. It is not immigrants stealing jobs. Corporations are using undocumented labor as a tool to keep everyone's wages low. They exploit migrants to undercut labor, and when migrants start organizing for better conditions, companies call ICE on them to silence them. The only thing that migrants are stealing is the blame for a collapsing system that has always been rigged against the working class. And Americans, in their stunning ignorance, are falling for it. They're not asking why are things hard. They're not asking who actually benefits from these narratives. They're simply punching down because it is understandably a lot easier to kick someone below you than it is to look up and see the boots on your own neck. I want to take a moment here, not to excuse anything, but to speak to the people who might be starting to feel uneasy. Maybe you didn't know that this was really happening. Maybe you never looked all that close. Maybe you just believed what you were told. That's not unusual. The system is built on disinformation. You've been fed stories your whole life about who to blame and who to fear, who deserves rights and who doesn't. Stories that are designed to keep you angry at the people below you instead of the ones in charge. So yeah, I get how people end up here. Confused, defensive, and maybe even ashamed. But here's the thing. At some point, not knowing stops becoming a defense. At some point, the evidence is right in front of you. Once you've seen it, the detentions, the surveillance, the erosion of basic rights, you have a choice. You can say, I didn't realize what I was supporting. You can change direction. That still matters. That moment of clarity, it means something. But if you keep defending it, even now, if you know people are being targeted, disappeared, brutalized, and you look away because it hasn't ended up on your doorstep yet, then you're not neutral. You're not uninformed. you are siding with the violence of the state. You are choosing silence. You are choosing order over justice. You are choosing your own comfort over consciousness. There is no middle ground here. There is no neutral position in a system this violent. You either stand with the people being targeted, or you help build the machinery that will one day target you. But it doesn't have to be that way. Start now. Talk to your neighbors. Let them know that they are not alone. Know who in your community is the most vulnerable. Stand between them and the state. Of course, join your union, organize your workplace. The bosses want us to stay divided. They want us to stay blaming each other. Support mutual aid groups. When the system fails, they will be all that we have. Watch ICE, film them, track them, make them visible. Educate your friends about due process. Talk about rights. Talk about who is being stripped of their rights and their humanity and how. Refuse to be silent. Refuse to pretend this is normal. Refuse to look away. History has already shown us how this ends. But it's still being written. You don't have to clap while the doors lock behind someone else. You can wedge it open. You can pull someone through. You can be the one who shouts through the silence. You can be the one who pulls someone out of the fire. You can be the reason why this story ends differently, but only if you and we start now. Why did they take away your rights, and why did you clap for it? In my next video, I'll break down the why behind all of this. Why is the US government taking away your rights? And why did you clap for it? I'll talk about how protecting Capitol turns vaguely Hispanic-looking migrants and college students protesting genocide into threats in the eye of the state. What do these groups have in common, and what ideology justifies their repression? Come back for part 2, where I connect the dots between white supremacy, neoliberalism, and fascism.